The Red Sox always seem to be the interest kings every offseason, and they continue to do that in this one. We'll talk about everything and much more in this episode of the Locked On Red Sox podcast.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I want to welcome you back into Locked On Red Sox podcast, and thank you so much for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen of every single day. I'm your host, Massachusetts Pirates team insider, J.K. Nizuski, and it seems like every single offseason since Chaim Bloom has been at the top of the Red Sox front office, Boston has been labeled as interest kings. They seem to be interested in every single free agent out there, every single trade candidate out there, and fans have a very difficult time of deciphering what is real interest and what is fake interest, because the Red Sox can easily be reported as express interest or inquired on a specific player, but that doesn't mean that they're negotiating with them or looking into those specific deals. They might just be having a phone call with either the agent or a team to figure out if the interest is there where they can make a deal happen or if not. And that's the tough part about MLB free agency, is deciphering whether interest is real, if it's just conversations, or really how to think about it if it's actually going to happen. Makes it even more difficult when Elon Musk now makes everybody verified, it seems like, on Twitter, and anybody can put out there the Red Sox have signed Aaron Judge to a 10-year deal. And it's difficult if you don't look at their bio, their name on Twitter, if it's real or not, especially as the offseason continues to go and we start to see a lot of these deals start to heat up and come together. You're going to see a lot more fake accounts or parody accounts say that things are real. So if I were you, I would do a very close look either at their bio, at what their name is on Twitter. There's a lot of people who can, say they're Ken Rosenthal, but just put a Z at the S where in Rosenthal, and make it very easy for you to think that is real when it's actually not. So if I were you, I would double, triple, quadruple check, kind of like I do, and a lot of other people out there on Twitter do. If a deal is reported, make sure that is real before either retweeting it, liking it, quote tweeting it, so then you aren't one of those people that are continuing to believe and spread some of these false reports. But that's something that's very difficult during an off season, to not get into some of these things that may make you think are actually happening that might not. And especially when guys like Ken Rosenthal, the real Ken Rosenthal, are putting out there that the Red Sox he considers to be one of the big spenders this offseason. And that implants in a lot of fans' minds that the Red Sox are going to go out there and give an Aaron Judge $350 million. Go out there and get Jacob deGrom for $35 to $40 million. But fans need to understand, even though that the Red Sox might want to spend a lot of money, they're going to have to spend it smartly. And I know a lot of fans understand that and want the team to do that. But then those same fans that want the team to spend smartly also go out there and get all upset when they don't get a Jacob deGrom or a Justin Verlander for $30-40 million. And think about in their minds how that might prohibit the team from being able to sign Xander Bogaerts to an extension or Rafael Devers to an extension. And as we saw back in 2019, payroll adds up. When you spend a lot of money and you give multiple guys $30-40 million here or there, it's difficult for a team to stay under the luxury tax and still be able to spend a lot of money. Not every team is like the New York Mets, the New York Yankees, or the Los Angeles Dodgers. Now, I understand that the Red Sox are a big market team, but that doesn't mean that they have to go out there and spend have a $250 million payroll every single year. That's not sustainable. And that's one thing that I feel like when a lot of fans may see some of these guys that the Red Sox are interested in that aren't these big names or a big splash, they don't understand that a lot of pieces are going to have to go onto the puzzle for this team to get back to World Series contention. When you look back at what the Red Sox were able to do in 2013, now I'm not saying that that's going to be the exact blueprint for this next season, but we saw them allocate a lot of that money to multiple different players like a David Ross, a Shane Victorino, a Johnny Gomes. Now that might not be the route that Heimblum is going to go, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's as smart as he can be with the money that he is given to make sure that the Red Sox are going to be competitive for multiple years in the future. That's what he has explained that his mindset is since joining the team, and making sure that they don't give $45 million to Jacob deGrom, so then they're not able to, give that money to a reliever or Xander Bogaerts or Rafael Devers. And I think that especially with some of these guys that the Red Sox are expressed interest in, fans need to think logically. Is this the right move for the Red Sox, not only this year, but for the future? And especially when deals don't work out, like we've seen a lot of them, not only in this past season, but in the recent future for the Red Sox, especially if a team gives a player 6-7 years and that player is going to get older into 36, 37-year-old sort of seasons. It doesn't make any sense for a team to overspend those types of specific years. So it's not like a Pablo Sandoval, or even you can mention like a Chris Sale. Like when you get to the later parts of those deals, that those players aren't worth that amount of money. And so we're starting to see the Red Sox have to make some of those decisions. One of them is Nathan Eovaldi, who apparently it was reported by Rob Bradford that Nathan Eovaldi was uh, offered a multi-year contract. Now, I'm very curious to see how many years that is, especially with the injuries that we've seen Eovaldi stack up, not only with his time with the Red Sox over these past 2 seasons, but people also got to remember he's got 2 Tommy John surgeries. He's very injury prone, even though he is very effective when he is on the field for the Red Sox. Despite some struggles this past season, we talked about it in our last episode, that Eovaldi was offered a qualifying offer. I'm very curious to see if he does accept that or if he's looking for a multi-year deal. Probably the Red Sox are hoping that he, denies that qualified offer, so then they don't have to pay him that $19 million, which in my opinion, he is not worth. And we could see him get a 2-year, 35 million dollar contract. MLB Trade Rumors expects Eovaldi to receive a shorter deal, kind of like a 2-year, $34 million contract. That's $17 million annual value. And that's very similar to what the Red Sox gave him just a few years ago after the 2018 season. Very curious to see if he gets a similar sort of contract, but I could see $15-17 million around that range. And Eovaldi has expressed, throughout this season that he was very interested in re-signing with the team. We saw that he was a mentor for a guy like Brian Bayo and many of the other younger pitchers. I think especially with Eovaldi being comfortable in the Boston market, being comfortable with the team under Alex Cora, I think he's going to want to re-sign. I think that the Red Sox will get it done, especially if it's for the right money. And I hope that Eovaldi is able to get back to what we saw, how effective he was in 2021, is able to avoid some of the home run production that we saw him allow throughout this last season. He's able to avoid those injuries, but especially as a pitcher starts to get into his later 30s, it's very difficult to avoid not only the decline of their performance on the field, but the ability to stay on the field as well. So I think money will play a factor into a lot of that, not only the decision making that Eovaldi makes, but also how much money the Red Sox give to Eovaldi due to his age and due to their projected production that they see of him in the next few years. We also saw the team express a few interesting trade candidates that we've seen been on the market for around the last year and a half. And the Red Sox expressed some interest towards some of these players during the trade deadline, but didn't make anything happen. Now, first one is catcher on the Athletics, Sean Murphy. His name has been bounced around not only on Red Sox Twitter, but around the Red Sox. It seems like since last trade deadline, the Sox did reportedly speak with the A's about Sean Murphy during the trade deadline. Didn't get anything done, but very curious to see which way they go in the catching position. Now, we know that Reese McGuire is currently slotted in that starting catcher position. And then we see Connor Wong probably as a backup as well. Now, especially with what we saw from Reese McGuire during his short stint with the Red Sox after coming over to Boston during the trade deadline, batted close to 400 and was very productive for the team, not only on the offensive side, but also on the defensive side. But I could see the Red Sox trying to upgrade on this position and see Reese McGuire more as a backup catcher, and then maybe bounce Connor Wong as the third catcher. And he also has the ability to play third base and second base as well. But Sean Murphy's probably going to require a pretty good haul for the Red Sox, and that's one thing with these two trade candidates. The team needs to figure out what not only players but young players and prospects are untouchable. What guys are they okay with trading? We saw Chaim Bloom mention that during the end of the year press conference. He was open to trading some of these prospects that they've built up in this very deep farm system for the Red Sox. But one thing to keep in mind is that the A's are rebuilding. They look at Sean Murphy as one of those guys that is going to be able to give them a lot of prospect capital back in a trade like this. He is arbitration controllable until 2025 and had a very productive season in 2022, ended up batting 250 with 18 home runs and 66 RBIs. And so they'd give the Red Sox not only a great defensive catcher, but a power catcher as well, which is very rare to find in the majors at the moment. And Alex Spear, who initially reported this interest that the Red Sox had, cited Brayan Bello as a type of a top tier MLB ready younger player that the A's would want to headline a deal for Sean Murphy. It'd be very difficult for me to see the Red Sox want to trade Bello, and he's sort of, in my opinion, considered untouchable, especially with how effective we saw him be on the mound during his short stint with the team in his rookie year, but has so much potential. And I'd be very surprised if the Red Sox and Chaim Bloom want to give up that potential for a guy in Sean Murphy in a position that I thought that they felt pretty comfortable going into 2023 with Connor Wong in the backup and then Reese McGuire as the starter, and they could kind of platoon those two. So very curious to see where they go on that front and who could potentially be the headliner in the deal for Sean Murphy. Also, very curious to see sort of where the talks for outfielder on the Pirates, Bryan Reynolds, go as well. He's somebody who hits free agency following the 2025 season. And this is another guy who is going to require not only an MLB ready top tier talent, but also a good haul of prospects as well. The Pirates are another team that are rebuilding, and Reynolds is one of the most premier young outfielders that the league has at the moment. Ended up batting 262 this past season, 27 home runs, over 614 plate appearances with the Pirates. And I wouldn't be surprised if, with his defense, Reynolds could be a corner outfield spot. We could see the Red Sox potentially try and trade a guy like Alex Verdugo to swap out for Reynolds. Maybe we could see Verdugo be one of those headliners in a trade like this, but then the Red Sox would also have to add in some of their top tier talent in their farm system as well to be able to get a guy like Bryan Reynolds, who has so much value at the moment. But that's one of the biggest decisions that the Sox need to make. Who is not only our future for this next season, but who do we want in our farm system for the foreseeable future, and where do we see those specific guys, and who are we okay with trading away for a guy like Bryan Reynolds or a catcher in Sean Murphy? But both of these positions are positions that I won't be surprised that the Red Sox want to upgrade on, as well as pitcher and the bullpen as well. But we're going to get much more into those guys that the Red Sox have expressed interest into on the pitcher side in our second segment. But before we do that, I just want to take a second to talk to you about BetOnline.net, which is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. We've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We are always the fastest and easiest way to find your betting fix. And head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. Bet online where the game starts. You can also continue to bet on potentially what free agents might come to the team, No, I'm just kidding. I wish that was a feature, but you can bet on tons of different stuff, basketball, football, as I mentioned, and continue to get ready for Major League betting as well. But we're going to continue to look at some of the guys that the Red Sox have expressed interest more on the pitching side now. We spoke about the possibility of the Red Sox re-signing Nathan Eovaldi to a multi-year deal, and that could really determine where the Red Sox want to go in terms of filling in the rotation. Now, Chris Sale's slide in there. He's expected to come back full strength. Garrett Whitlock was announced to also be in the rotation. Brian Bayo, I wouldn't be surprised, gets a spot in there. Very curious to see if the Red Sox decide to trade a guy like Nick Pivetta or potentially move him to the bullpen. But some guys that the Red Sox have expressed interest is a guy like Tyler Anderson, who sort of came out of nowhere this past season, ended up pitching for the Los Angeles Dodgers and had struggled in his previous seasons with the Brewers. And with what we saw from the Dodgers, it was a completely different pitcher. And Tyler Anderson did have some shoulder issues, which is something to keep in mind, especially with how much value he holds. And if the Red Sox really want to get into a player that has some injury past, and especially recent injury past, especially with what we saw this past season, with the injuries start to really stack up and, didn't have enough depth to be able to fill in that. But that's something that I think with a guy like Tyler Anderson, you're able to really utilize him in multiple different spots, probably with the money that he's going to demand, mainly as a starter, but also has the ability to come out of the bullpen as well. He ended up tossing 178 innings for the Dodgers with a 2.57 ERA and did a great job of restricting the long ball. His home runs per nine was more than half. In 2021, it was 1.46, and then it went down to 0.71 in 2022. So definitely a plus right there. Very curious to see how much value he does demand on the open market. The Red Sox also, I forgot to mention, as we talked about in our last episode, James Paxton, I wouldn't be surprised, could also be slotted into that rotation role or also as a long reliever in the bullpen. But another pitcher that we could also see the Red Sox try and add to their rotation is a guy like Andrew Heaney. He ended up really struggling with the Yankees after being traded from the Angels last year. Ended up playing 12 games with the Yankees, 5 starts, and had an ERA of 7.32, but really bounced back with the Los Angeles Dodgers, just like Tyler Anderson did as well. I don't know what the Dodgers tend to do with some of these pitchers. It has to be something in the water, but anytime they step onto that field in Los Angeles, immediately they become a great pitcher. And it's very different, it seems like, with New York, with the Yankees, and also with the Red Sox. Anytime they get some of these guys that have tons of success in these other places or struggle in these other places, the Sox can't seem to really fix them. Same with New York as well. But we're happy about New York not being able to fix those type of players. Andrew Heaney's a perfect example. But with the Dodgers, ended up accumulating a 3.10 ERA through 72 innings. Did a great job of using more of his slider and less of his changeup, which we saw really affect his production with New York. But he's another guy who had some injury history this past year, ended up missing around 3 months across 2 separate IL stints with left shoulder problems. So that could definitely hurt his value a little bit and maybe be a reason why the Red Sox should avoid a guy like Andrew Heaney with some of those injury issues, kind of like as I mentioned with Anderson. But looking towards more of the bullpen side, somebody that the Red Sox expressed interest to as well is Seth Lugo. He enjoyed 7 solid seasons pitching out of the Mets bullpen, and he continued that success last season, ended up throwing 65 innings with a 3.60 ERA, and also ended up maintaining a strong walk rate of 6.6% and a solid strikeout rate of 25.4%. But very curious to see sort of which way the Red Sox go in terms of not only the rotation, but the bullpen. Both of those have been massive issues for the team throughout this past season, and is something that really needs to be a major focus for the team going into 2023. And then last guy that I want to mention is a guy like Chris Bassitt, who the Red Sox also mentioned that they had interest in. He was a force on the mound for the Mets and making 30 starts with a 3.42 ERA, a 3.66 FIP, and also had a great hit per nine and walk per nine, and also strikeout per nine percentage of 7.9 hits per nine, 2.4 walks per nine, and then strikeouts per nine was 8.3. But one thing to keep in mind is he is going into his 34 age season. Very curious to see what value he holds going into that age range. Essentially, wouldn't be upset if the Red Sox gave him 2 or 3 years. A little bit of a stretch, especially when going into your 37th age season. Could definitely see his production decline once we start to get towards that 36th, 37th age season. But if the Red Sox offer him, $15 million, I wouldn't be upset with that at all. His stuff is so filthy. And we've seen him continue to get better and better, it seems like, especially from his time with the A's and with the Mets last season. I could see him fit very well in a Red Sox uniform and wouldn't be upset if the Red Sox went after him. But there's just so many guys out there that this team could go out and get to make not only the rotation, the bullpen, but the lineup even better. And as I mentioned at the start, this Red Sox team is the interest kings, and we're going to continue to be talking about all the guys that the Red Sox are interested in and sort of giving our thoughts on if we think it's the right fit or if they should avoid some of these different players. But I decided to ask you guys on Twitter your thoughts on the team's interest in guys like Chris Bassitt, Sean Murphy, Bryan Reynolds, and we saw Omar Ruiz ended up saying all good moves / trades. Let's see if they can pull the trigger on a few of them or even all of them with the side eyes. I'd be very excited if they were able to make a lot of these moves and be able to really upgrade on multiple of these holes that we see that they have in their depth chart. And we saw the Red Sox bandwagon say, I have always been an affinity for players with AL pitching experience, especially with those who excel against AL East teams. That's why I'd be stoked if the Red Sox got Bassitt, despite the loss of draft picks and international bonus pool money. Couldn't agree more. Said it very well right there, especially with how much we saw the Red Sox struggle against AL East teams. Definitely good for a pitcher to be vetted with going against those types of opponents. And as I mentioned before, Bassitt did pitch with the Oakland A's for a majority of his career, so he does have a lot of experience in the AL, and we do see some of that getting used to from NL moving over to AL, getting used to acclimating to the different types of leagues. But luckily now with the universal DH, it's probably a little bit less of an acclimation, but still is something to keep in mind, especially when you're signing somebody for a good amount of money. We saw Ryan Lindley. He said, Bassitt, yes. Don't think Reynolds is a fit because of defense. And as I mentioned, defense is one of the things that Reynolds really struggles with, and that's why I primarily see him not as a center fielder like he's been mostly playing over in Pittsburgh, but mainly as a left fielder or a right fielder, primarily left, because what we saw with Alex Verdugo, with some of his defensive liabilities, left is probably the most safe position, especially with how tough it is to play right field at Fenway Park. We saw James Stewart, friend of the podcast. He said, I love all three of these players, but what's going out? I'd love to see the Red Sox trade for Shane Bieber, also David Bednar, Scott Barlow, and James Karinchak are relief pitchers I'd like to see the Red Sox add. Couldn't agree more. All three of those pitchers are very reliable for their respectable teams in the bullpen this past season. Be very curious to see sort of what hole, it would require from the Red Sox. Wouldn't be surprised if, we see a David Bednar and Bryan Reynolds sort of combined trade. Definitely would cost a lot for the Red Sox in terms of prospect capital, but would definitely fill some great spots that they have in outfield, not only in the bullpen as well. And Shane Bieber, somebody that we saw, Cooper Leonard mentioned when he came on just a few weeks ago. I could definitely see the team go and try and get him. Probably would require some of their big dogs at the top of their farm system rankings. Marcelo Meyer, wouldn't be surprised. Also, like a Brian Bayo or something like that, which, as I mentioned earlier in this episode, is somebody that I'd really like to see the Red Sox keep and hold on to as sort of one of those untouchables. And then we also saw Dave say Devers first or 2023 offseason is going to be another clown show. And I don't disagree. The one thing that, I've been keeping in mind, not only with Xander, but also with Rafael Devers, is something that Chris Cotillo mentioned over on Fenway Rundown a few different times, is that both of these deals are going to take time with the amount of money and with both parties wanting to be able to build up that leverage and, not immediately sign, so then, they can get as much money as possible. Chris said that he doesn't see either of those deals really happening until January or February. Wouldn't be surprised by that. And that's one thing that, I think fans need to keep in the back of their mind is the team is mainly focused on trades and free agents right now. Obviously, Xander is one of those free agents, but he's going to have his opportunity to be able to talk with a lot of these different teams for the first time in his career. So I wouldn't be surprised if either of those contracts don't get done until around January or February. And that's not coming from me. That's coming from an inside source of Chris Cotillo, but over on his Fenway Rundown podcast, he does a great job of, talking about all this different stuff as well. But we're going to continue over on this podcast, bring you as much content as we can Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. And not only continue to bring, episodes like this where we talk about some of these news or updates that have been coming out about the Red Sox, but we're also going to be having some great interviews. And one guy to really get excited about is Alex Benellis. We're going to be speaking with him on Wednesday and get his thoughts a little bit about, what his reaction was of being traded over to the Red Sox, also how he enjoyed his first season in the Red Sox farm system. And then on Thursday, we have pitcher Brandon Walter coming back on the show to talk about his first season in AAA, how he is recovering from his injury and much, much more, but get super excited for that. And if you have not yet, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Red Sox on YouTube, also wherever you get your podcast, so you can be notified anytime an episode comes out. But we want to thank you so much for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen of every single day. Now make your second listen Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, it's available on this app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And also make sure to follow Locked On Red Sox over on Twitter. It's LO_Red Sox. You can also follow myself over there. It's at Jake Iggy. And also my co-host Lauren. It's at La. 3 Laws. Lauren with 4 R's. But we greatly appreciate everybody tuning in to the Locked On Red Sox podcast, and we greatly appreciate the support. We hope everybody has a great rest of their day, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. But we'll end it how we always end it. Let's go Sox. Peace.